Thank you, Chairwoman. Good morning, Commissioner, and thank you for being here. As Senator Young touched on briefly in her comments, obviously parity is of primary importance to those of us representing upstate areas. The parity, as I've seen it reported as recently as over this weekend, is, and correct me if I'm wrong, that it's been a $22 billion proposal for upstate and a $26 billion proposal for MTA. Is that generally accurate figures?
I'm honestly not sure what the MTA number is, but $22 billion is the transportation budget.
Well, there was an announcement earlier in the year between Governor Cuomo and Mayor de Blasio about, I believe it was $8.3 billion figure for MTA. Do you know whether that $8.3 billion is per year, and for how many years that commitment is for?
I don't. I would suspect that that's a conversation between the legislature and the executive.
Okay. With regards to CHIPS funding, as I read the executive budget so far, there is no increase for CHIPS funding?
That's correct. It's the same amount as last year.
And with the other $22 billion for upstate roads and bridges, how much of that will be going towards local roads and bridges as opposed to state?
Well, $500 million for each program. Recall we have the Bridge New York program for $1 billion and the Pave New York program. So I'd add that the Pave New York program will really be in addition to CHIPS funding, as an example, because it will provide across the board additional resources for local governments.
Is it the intention to distribute those monies in the same kind of formula fashion as CHIPS is distributed?
There is a formula, but I can't say to you with certainty that it's the same.
Do we have that available as far as where that spending is going to be for upstate roads and bridges, or local roads and bridges?
Those have not been identified yet, but we will have that information. We're pouring through building the criteria now.
Okay. Now, with regards to the dedicated highway bridge and trust fund, it's my understanding that that brings in roughly $6-point-some billion a year. Can you explain, if that number is accurate, correct me if it's not, how that money's broken out, where that's spent?
I can't, but I'm happy to get you those answers.
I would. My understanding is that the dedicated highway bridge and trust fund intention when it was set up was to be towards capital funding for roads and bridges, and it seems that a lot of that goes towards regular maintenance as opposed to capital projects, and also a great deal of it seems to go to administration as well rather than capital projects. So that's certainly a concern of mine in those resources not being used as they were originally intended, that are collected through a variety of drivers' fees and fees at the gas pumps as well. So it's important to all of us in this state that that money is spent the way it was intended as it's collected. And I think it's been a long time since it hasn't been followed. And I would like your attention at that, and maybe an explanation as to the breakout of how those funds are currently being expended, proposed for this year, and that. On public transit in upstate, we seem to have a bit of a battle and dispute going on between Department of Transportation and Department of Health as it comes to non-emergency Medicaid transportation and the use of public transit for those rides. In my rural counties that I represent are struggling greatly with rides being assigned to taxi companies rather than through the public transit that is provided by the counties, or in some cases by the ARCs of the county, to the point where one adjacent county to mine, Tioga County, has completely shut down their transit system because of loss of ridership, because of non-emergency Medicaid transportation no longer being directed to the public transit. I believe Department of Transportation has been supportive in my efforts and my colleagues' efforts to rectify that we're still having quite a battle with the Department of Health, who is assigning those rides. Are you up to speed on that issue, and can you address what DOT is doing with regards to non-emergency Medicaid transportation, trying to get those rides on our public transit systems?
So that's the first I've heard of that. But I will be reaching out to the Department of Health as well to understand what their thinking is related to that.
And in last year's budget, there was some $4 million that was allocated towards rural public transit systems to make up for this loss of ridership. So there's an acknowledgement that it's having an impact. That was last year's budget. $4 million was appropriated. None of it has been distributed to our rural transit systems, which are dying on the vine right now with the lack of ridership. And I would encourage you to look into that, Commissioner, because as more and more of our rural counties shut down their transit systems, that's not going to help anybody, including those that are the Medicaid recipients that are getting these rides and the like in that regard. One final question with regards to the Tappan Zee Bridge. Can you explain to us how the state is going to pay for the Tappan Zee Bridge?
I don't have the knowledge of that final plan. Obviously, they received a TIFIA loan. The work continues. Great progress is being made. Final plan is not yet available.
Who's putting that plan together?
That would be a question for the Thruway Authority.
Okay. Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Thank you.